Welcome to 10-Minute Record Reviews number 36, and this time we're going to talk about Nina Simone's live album from 1970, Black Gold, a real classic. And I have here a first pressing, which is a wee bit crackly, but sounds great. This album came out on RCA at the time. So what to expect? Well, Nina Simone, of course, has a quite a distinct career arc in that she is very much a what you might call a while she's establishing herself and has not much choice in this. She's very much a a jazz vocalist as such in the late 50s and early 60s. But this is her at the peak of her subsequent phase, her what's sometimes termed her civil rights phase, where she writes and performs very politically conscious, socially conscious, and powerful music. And this is recorded in 1969, really at the apex of Black Power as a movement, Pan-Africanism, and so on. This is a powerful political record as well as a wonderful musical record. It's also a live album, and the interplay between the band and the audience is partly because of the times and the politics. The interplay is just really palpable, and the connection is really palpable between Nina and her fans, and that adds really to the value of this particular record. So Nina Simone, of course, born Eunice Wayman, trained as a concert pianist. She achieved a great deal of success during her period of training or recognition, but she also encountered significant barriers because of the color of her skin, including being denied further graduate training. She also was required to, she changed her name because she had been trained as a classical pianist, but she was surviving by playing jazz bars and cocktail bars, and didn't want her family to know that basically she was slumming it musically, and so changed her name to cover herself as her career began to take off in a more jazz setting as opposed to a classical setting. Between the mid-50s and the mid-60s, as I mentioned, she's a classic sort of jazz vocalist, but then she becomes captivated by and focused on and driven by the civil rights movement after about 1964, and all of her records for the next decade are very much informed by the plight of Black people in America and by racial justice and Black Power, Pan-African themes. Really quite powerful stuff. She sold fewer records during this period, but she was arguably a lot more influential. And probably, if there's any one phase of hers which is most noted by music fans and collectors and folks of all stripes, it's this particular phase. This is recorded in 1969 at the Philharmonic Hall in New York City. It was nominated for the Grammys for Best Performance, R&B Performance in 1971. She lost to Aretha Franklin. Ironically, 2 years later, Aretha Franklin wins another Grammy, and it's for a song which Nina actually debuts on this record, which is Young, Gifted, and Black. So, I mean, to be fair to Aretha, obviously, like everything, she made it her own, but there's a little bit of irony there. You could call this jazz, but really this is Nina at her iconoclastic, undefinable best. It's jazz, but it's also soul, it's Afrobeat, there's folk on here, all kinds of different stuff. So many different influences, and it speaks to her great capacity to research and follow and absorb all these different musical styles and synthesize them into something really quite compelling. I mean, there are lots of ways in which she exhibits the characteristics of genius, but this is really one of those albums where it really is a work of a genius to pull this together. By this point, of course, she'd been a leading voice and a figure in the civil rights movement for about 7 years, and this is the point where, looking back, when reflecting on her life, she would say that she felt the most alive, and you can really feel that in her performance here. Her performances also were often felt, at the time, she was considered to be, difficult and erratic or mercurial or you pick the term. We now know, of course, in retrospect, that she was subsequently diagnosed as having bipolar disorder. And that led to obviously a lot of her struggles, but she wasn't struggling here tonight. Here she was definitely on in a good way, and really quite powerful. So the album begins somewhat strangely with two consecutive versions of the same song sung by two different people. And the song, of course, is "Black is the Color of My True Love's Hair." The first one, Nina herself sings, and she accompanies herself on piano. It's a very it's a powerful, kind of haunting performance. Then immediately thereafterwards, with no segue or other introduction, Emil Latimer, who's her guitarist, does his own version with Nina accompanying him on piano, which is and the contrast is very interesting. Two beautiful performances. Slightly strange to have those two back-to-back songs, but clearly the audience appreciates it, and obviously so does the listener. Then there's she had done a cover of a song from Hair called "Ain't Got No, I Got Life" the previous year, which had been a minor hit for her, and she performs it again here. The audience loves it. Clearly, they're all very familiar with it. It's a real celebration of sort of freedom and self, even when times are hard. She then later on in the song slows it down and does these sort of typical. Sometimes she would harangue her audience. She didn't think they were measuring up, but she's not doing that tonight. She's very charming with her little asides, and the audience is totally lapping it up. Then the side one concludes with a lovely tune, West Wind, which is primarily a percussion tune. Nina starts off talking about the importance of drums in her music and in African music in general. This is a song she actually learned from a friend of hers, a South African singer called Miriam Makeba, whom she mentions in her patter on this album. And lyrically it has a theme of the West Wind, about this theme of Pan-African unity. And it's got basically the music of the song is a conga and drum accompaniment by members of her band, which continues to build in intensity. Towards the end, Nina is chanting, "Unify us, don't divide us." It's pretty powerful stuff and well delivered. Side two, total change of pace, is a cover of Sandy Denny's song, "Who Knows Where the Time Goes." Now, a lot of people will know Sandy Denny is one of the most famous folk singers to come out of the British folk scene in the 60s. Of course, the lead singer for Fairport Convention. And when she's leading into it, Nina says, it's hard when you're performing. People want you to give the people what they want when you're performing, but if you do that, you use yourself up entirely. It's a very interesting little aside and kind of a window into her mind at that time. Then a song called "The Assignment," which is about the gap between lovers, as Nina says, especially married lovers. It's probably a soul song as much as anything else, about people who are in different emotional spaces and can't connect, and Nina, of course, who had relationship troubles of her own, of a variety of kinds, has no difficulty connecting to the emotion of this particular song. And then we get to the big sort of anthemic song, which was to become a hit off of this record, "To Be Young, Gifted, and Black," and this is the one, of course, which Aretha covers later on and actually titles her album after. It's a civil rights anthem. Nina points out this is not actually about white people. Don't be offended. It's just not about you. Black people. She said, "My people need all the nourishment they can get," and this is what this is about. But for anybody, the song is a phenomenal song. The lyrics are adapted from a play, or a half-finished play, by a friend of hers, Lorraine Hansberry, who sadly died prematurely of natural causes, but died a few years before, but not before having become a civil rights icon herself by writing the play "A Raisin in the Sun." For Nina, because of course Lorraine was her friend, this is a very emotional song. She's joined by some backup singers and delivers a wonderful, the original version of the song, but it's a really wonderful version, and weaves in some of the lyrics from West Wind, which we heard on side one, about unifying us, not dividing us, and so on. And stormy applause as she exits the stage. So it's a remarkable performance, and you can tell it was a really special night in New York that night. So it's a tour de force. As a live album, there's some rough edges where as a listener, you're not really in on what's going on stage. much as it can sometimes happen. And it's a bit of a problem when you're listening to it. You want to be part of it, but you don't really know what's happening, and there's something visual was happening, and maybe because there were other pieces. For instance, there was a version of Leonard Cohen's Suzanne, which she did the same night, which apparently is wonderful. I haven't actually heard it, but that could have been included, and some of these other pieces might have been edited out. So maybe all the right choices weren't made in pulling this together. That's not her fault, but still, as a consume the record, some few rough pieces there, so it's uneven. But as I said, it's a work of a genius, and I can't give this less than 4.5 stars. Do please listen to this.